It happened on a Friday night in early spring, one of those evenings where the city finally felt alive again after months of gray weather. My husband and I had reservations at a steakhouse downtown to celebrate our anniversary. Nothing huge, just dinner, drinks, and a chance to feel normal again after the roughest couple of years of my life. I got to the restaurant bar a little early because traffic had separated us. He was still parking the car while I went inside to wait. I remember standing in front of the mirror before we left the house, adjusting my blouse for almost 20 minutes. It was navy blue, soft fabric, slightly low cut. Nothing wild, but for me, wearing anything remotely revealing felt terrifying. A year earlier, I'd undergone a double mastectomy after testing positive for a hereditary breast cancer mutation that ran through the women in my family like some kind of curse. My mother had it, my grandmother had it. By the time my doctor looked me in the eye and told me my odds, I already knew what decision I had to make. People love using words like brave when they hear your story. The truth is, most of the time you don't feel brave. You just feel cornered. The surgeries were brutal. First the mastectomy itself, then reconstruction, drains, scar care, physical therapy, endless appointments. The emotional part hit even harder than the physical recovery. One day you look in the mirror and recognize yourself, and the next day you feel like a stranger living inside your own body. Even after reconstruction, things didn't magically become normal again. Movies make it seem like women walk out of surgery with perfect bodies and newfound confidence. Reality doesn't work that way. My implants still looked too high and too firm because they hadn't fully settled yet. My surgeon assured me everything was healing correctly, but I remained painfully self-conscious every time I got dressed, especially in public, especially around strangers. My husband, though, never stopped making me feel beautiful. Not once. That anniversary dinner was actually the first time in months I'd chosen a top that showed any cleavage at all. I picked it because he liked it, and because I was trying, really trying, to feel like myself again. So there I was, sitting at the bar, sipping sparkling water while waiting for him, trying not to overthink every little thing. That's when I heard them. A group of 6 people, 3 women and 3 men, sat beside me, already halfway drunk, loud enough that half the bar could hear them. At first, I ignored them because, honestly, people get noisy in bars all the time. Then one of the women laughed and said, "I swear every woman in this city has fake boobs now." Another chimed in immediately. "They always look ridiculous, too." One of the guys snorted, "Especially when they're bolted on like basketballs." They all laughed. I froze. At first, I tried convincing myself they weren't talking about me. But then I caught one of the women glancing directly toward my chest before leaning closer to her friend and whispering loud enough for me to hear anyway. "Oh my God, exactly like that." More laughter. I stared down into my glass and felt every ounce of confidence drain out of me in seconds. People who haven't gone through medical trauma don't understand how fragile recovery can be. You spend months trying to rebuild your identity piece by piece, and sometimes one careless comment can crack the whole thing open again. The conversation kept going. "I just don't get why women do it," one man said. "It screams insecurity." "And they all want attention," another woman added. "If you pay thousands for fake boobs, obviously you want people looking." I could feel my face getting hot. Part of me wanted to leave. Another part wanted to cry. Mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of the surgeries. Tired of pretending I wasn't insecure. Tired of carrying around scars nobody else could see. I kept thinking about the nights after surgery when I couldn't even lift my arms with pain. About waking up terrified before pathology results came back. About my husband sleeping upright in a hospital chair beside me because he refused to leave. And here these strangers were reducing all of it to some drunk joke about vanity. The bartender noticed my expression at one point and subtly asked if I was okay. I nodded because I didn't trust myself to speak. Then the woman beside me said the sentence that finally pushed me over the edge. "I hate fake breasts. They make women look fake too." That was it. I slowly turned on my stool and looked directly at the group. The table went quiet almost instantly. I don't think they expected me to confront them. I smiled politely. Not angry, not dramatic, just calm. "You know what I hate more than fake breasts?" I asked. Nobody answered. The woman who'd been laughing earlier suddenly looked uncomfortable. I held eye contact for a second longer and said very evenly, "Breast cancer." Silence. Complete silence. You could practically hear the music from the restaurant again because their entire table shut down immediately. One guy looked down at his beer. Another muttered, "Ah, damn." The woman closest to me blinked rapidly before saying, "Wait, seriously?" I nodded once. Double mastectomy, reconstruction surgery, 1 year ago. Nobody knew what to say after that. And honestly, good. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to embarrass them, but because for one brief moment they were forced to realize there was an actual human being sitting in front of them. Not some stereotype, not some punchline, not some random woman they could casually tear apart for entertainment. Just a person. A person with a story they never bothered considering. A minute later, one of the men quietly said, "I'm really sorry." The others started gathering their things awkwardly, suddenly desperate to leave the conversation behind. Within 2 minutes, the whole group paid their tab and disappeared toward the exit without another word. And right as they left, my husband walked through the front door. Perfect timing. The second my husband spotted me at the bar, his entire face lit up the way it always did when he saw me first in a crowd. That smile alone had carried me through more dark days than he probably realized. He walked over, leaned down, kissed my forehead, and immediately noticed something was off. "You okay?" he asked. I stared at him for about 2 seconds before bursting into laughter. Not polite laughter. Not nervous laughter. The kind of exhausted, slightly unhinged laugh you let out after surviving something emotionally ridiculous. He blinked. Should I be concerned?" I waved toward the empty seats beside me. "You literally missed the weirdest moment of my life." The bartender, who'd apparently been listening to everything the entire time, snorted into a glass he was drying. "Oh, he definitely did," he muttered. My husband sat beside me looking completely confused while I explained what had just happened. Halfway through the story, his expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "They actually said that? Out loud?" he asked. "Loud enough for half the restaurant." He shook his head slowly. "People are unbelievable." Then he paused for a second before adding carefully, "Are you all right?" That question mattered more than he probably knew, because the honest answer was complicated. Part of me was hurt. Of course I was. I'd spent a year rebuilding my confidence after losing a part of my body so deeply tied to femininity and identity. Hearing strangers mock me for something connected to survival hit harder than I expected. But another part of me honestly found the situation absurd. Imagine being so loudly judgmental that you accidentally insult a cancer survivor directly to her face. That level of bad luck almost felt cinematic. "I think I'm okay," I finally told him. "I'm mostly annoyed they almost ruined this blouse for me." That made him laugh immediately. For context, he knew exactly how long I debated wearing that top. The reconstruction process had done a number on my confidence. Before cancer, I never gave my body much thought. I wore swimsuits, tank tops, sundresses, normal things. After surgery, every outfit became emotional math. Does this show scars? Does this make me look uneven? Do people notice? Am I obvious? Even after my doctors assured me everything looked medically normal, I couldn't stop seeing every imperfection. The implant sat higher than natural breasts because the muscles and skin were still adjusting. Some days I thought they looked fine. Other days I felt like everyone around me could instantly tell. Most people, thankfully, never noticed or cared, but moments like the one at the bar fed directly into every insecurity I'd been fighting. My husband reached for my hand across the counter. "You know what I saw when I walked in?" he asked. "What?" "A beautiful woman in a blue blouse waiting for me." I rolled my eyes immediately. "That was disgustingly smooth. Been practicing for 20 years. The bartender laughed again and slid a menu toward us. "Your husband's smart. Keep him." "Trying to?" I said. The mood shifted after that. The tension faded, the embarrassment loosened its grip. And honestly, once the initial sting wore off, the whole situation became weirdly educational. Not just for them, for me too. Cancer changes the way you see people. Before my diagnosis, I probably made assumptions about strangers all the time without realizing it. Everybody does. You see someone for 5 seconds and convince yourself you know their story. That woman has too much plastic surgery. That guy looks lazy. That teenager is rude. That person is dramatic. We build entire narratives out of absolutely nothing. But illness strips that illusion away fast. While I was going through treatments and surgeries, I met women who looked perfectly healthy while secretly fighting stage 4 cancer. I met survivors with hidden scars, hidden wigs, hidden prosthetics, hidden grief. I met people carrying battles nobody around them would ever recognize. One woman in my support group used to say, "You never know what somebody had to survive just to leave the house today." That sentence stayed with me, because it was true. Nobody at that bar knew how long it took me to feel comfortable enough to wear that blouse. Nobody knew how many nights I stood crying in front of a mirror after surgery. Nobody knew my husband had to help wash my hair because I couldn't lift my arms. Nobody knew I spent weeks terrified pathology would find more cancer. To them, I was just another woman sitting at a bar. And honestly, I don't think those people were evil. Insensitive? Absolutely. Immature? Definitely. Cruel in that drunk group mentality kind of way? Sure. But I also think they were careless more than malicious.
they forgot a basic truth. Strangers are human beings with lives far more complicated than whatever assumptions you make about them in 30 seconds. By the time we got seated for dinner, my mood had completely recovered. Actually, the story somehow became funnier as the night went on. At one point, my husband raised his wine glass and said, "To fake boobs." I nearly choked laughing. "To modern medicine," I corrected. "Same thing," he replied. The waitress looked deeply confused while pouring water. Dinner ended up being wonderful. Steak, mashed potatoes, overpriced dessert, the full anniversary cliché. For the first time in months, I genuinely relaxed. And somewhere in the middle of that dinner, I realized something important. The people at the bar had embarrassed themselves far more than they embarrassed me. Because at the end of the day, my scars told a story of survival. Their comments only told a story about them. Over the next few weeks, I told the bar story to a handful of friends and family members, and every single person.
The waitress returned with our drinks while my husband was still shaking his head over the whole thing. "I still can't believe they kept going after the first comment," he said. "That's the confidence alcohol gives people," I replied. "Apparently tequila turns everyone into a body language expert." He laughed. "You know what's wild? They probably went home thinking you taught them some profound life lesson." "I mean, maybe I did." "You absolutely traumatized at least one of them." That made me laugh harder than it should have. The bartender overheard us again and pointed in my direction. "For the record," he said, "that was the calmest mic drop moment I've ever witnessed." I covered my face with my hands. "Please don't encourage me." "No, seriously," he continued, leaning on the counter. "Most people would have exploded. You just quietly destroyed them emotionally." "Trust me," I said, "that wasn't confidence. That was pure exhaustion." And that was true. People imagine confrontation as this powerful cinematic thing where your heart pounds and dramatic music plays in your head. Real-life confrontation usually feels messy and uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I just hit a point where staying silent felt worse. For almost a year after surgery, I'd stayed silent about a lot of things. Silent when strangers stared too long. Silent when relatives made awkward comments like, "Well, at least reconstruction looks pretty realistic now." Silent when people asked invasive questions they had absolutely no business asking. One woman at a grocery store actually asked me if my husband was still attracted to me after surgery. Complete stranger. Human beings are unbelievable sometimes. Cancer has a weird way of removing social filters from other people. Suddenly, everyone feels entitled to comment on your body, your health, your choices, your scars. Some people mean well and simply don't know what to say. Others are just nosy. And occasionally you run into people like the group at the bar, people so wrapped up in their own conversation that they forget the stranger sitting 3 feet away might have a real reason for looking the way they do. My husband took a sip of his drink and tilted his head thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "I bet at least one of them will think twice before making comments like that again." "Maybe?" "No, seriously. You probably permanently rewired somebody tonight." I smiled faintly at that because maybe he was right. Embarrassment can be a brutal teacher. The thing about surviving something life-changing is that your perspective shifts in ways you never expect. Before cancer, a comment like theirs probably would have ruined my entire week. I would have gone home spiraling, criticizing myself in the mirror for hours. But after surgery, after pathology reports, after hospital rooms and fear and recovery, something changes. You realize how unbelievably fragile life actually is. And once you understand that, random strangers at a bar start losing power over you. Not completely. I'd be lying if I said their words didn't sting. They did, especially because they targeted an insecurity I was actively struggling with. Reconstruction isn't instant. Your body changes slowly over time, and there's an awkward stage nobody talks about enough where things just look unfinished. That's the best word for it. Unfinished. The implants sat higher than natural breasts because the muscles underneath were tight from surgery. The skin still looked slightly swollen in places. My scars had faded some, but were still visible up close. Every follow-up appointment included some version of, "Give it more time." Meanwhile, I was trying to re-enter normal life while feeling anything but normal. My husband noticed me getting quiet and squeezed my hand gently. "You're thinking too much again." "I know." "You looked beautiful tonight before those idiots spoke," he said. "You looked beautiful after too." I smiled softly. "You're legally required to say that." "False. Wedding vows never mentioned honesty exemptions." I laughed again. That was one thing cancer couldn't take from us, our ability to joke through terrible situations. Honestly, humor carried us through most of recovery. The morning after one surgery, I woke up groggy and miserable while my husband helped adjust my pillows. I looked down at the surgical drains attached to my body and muttered,
Wow, this is not the sexy anniversary body I imagined in my 20s. Without missing a beat, he said, "Still the hottest woman in this hospital." Absolutely ridiculous, man. But comments like that mattered more than he realized. Because recovery after mastectomy isn't only physical. It messes with your identity in strange ways. Breasts are tied so heavily to femininity in American culture that losing them can feel emotionally disorienting, even if you know the surgery saved your life. Nobody warns you how complicated that grief can become. You can be grateful and devastated at the same time, relieved and insecure, strong and heartbroken, all simultaneously. That's why the people at the bar unknowingly hit such a nerve. Their comments reduce something deeply emotional and medically necessary into shallow gossip. Fake. That word stuck with me for a while afterward. Because reconstructed breasts aren't fake in the way people usually mean it. They're not some impulsive cosmetic choice for attention. They're part of surviving, part of healing, part of reclaiming yourself after cancer takes something from you. And honestly, even if someone gets cosmetic surgery purely because they want to, strangers still don't get to publicly humiliate them for it. That realization hit me hard too. Why were these people so comfortable discussing another woman's body like it existed for public review? It's bizarre when you really think about it. Nobody sits at a bar loudly analyzing random men's stomachs or hairlines with the same energy people critique women's appearances. Women are expected to look beautiful naturally, but not try too hard. Confident, but not vain. Sexy, but only in approved ways. It's exhausting. By the time dinner arrived, the mood at our table had completely shifted from awkward to reflective. My husband cut into a steak and looked at me for a second. "You know what I'm proud of?" "What?" "You didn't let them ruin tonight." That sentence stayed with me. Because he was right. A year earlier, they probably would have ruined my night completely. I would have gone home feeling ashamed and exposed and ugly. But instead, after the initial shock passed, I found myself sitting in a warm restaurant across from the man who loved me through every scar and every surgery, eating overpriced dessert and laughing about the world's most unfortunate bar conversation. That felt like progress. Real progress. Not the dramatic movie kind where you suddenly love yourself overnight. The quieter kind. The kind where hurtful comments still sting, but they no longer define how you see yourself. And honestly, that's when I realized healing had already begun long before that anniversary dinner. I just hadn't noticed it yet.
A few months after that anniversary dinner, I attended a breast cancer awareness fundraiser with a friend from my support group. Normally, I avoided those events because they could feel emotionally overwhelming. Too many pink ribbons, too many smiling survivor photos, hiding very real pain underneath. But that year felt different. Maybe because I was finally starting to feel like myself again, or maybe because the incident at the bar had quietly changed something in me. During the event, a younger woman approached our table. She couldn't have been older than 26 or 27. She had a pixie haircut, nervous eyes, and the stiff posture of someone still adjusting to life after surgery. I recognized that posture immediately. She glanced at my chest for half a second before looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I wasn't staring." I smiled gently. "You're fine." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How long did it take before you started feeling weird?" she asked. That question hit me harder than I expected, because every survivor knows exactly what weird means in that context. The strange disconnect, the discomfort, the feeling that your body became unfamiliar overnight. I thought about my answer carefully before responding. "Honestly," I said, "longer than I wanted it to." She nodded immediately, like she'd been waiting for someone to say that out loud. "I thought once reconstruction was done, I'd feel normal again," she admitted. "But I don't. That's because recovery isn't just physical." Her eyes watered a little at that, and suddenly I realized how many women quietly carry those feelings without ever talking about them. Everyone celebrates survival, and they should, but very few people talk openly about what comes after survival. The identity crisis, the insecurity, the grief over losing a version of yourself. Even when you're grateful to be alive, there's still loss involved, especially for younger women. We ended up talking for almost an hour that night. At one point, she admitted she hadn't worn anything fitted in public since surgery because she was terrified people would notice her reconstruction. I almost laughed at the timing, because just months earlier, I'd been sitting in that exact fear myself at the restaurant bar. So I told her the story, the whole thing, the drunk strangers, the comments, my response. Her jaw dropped halfway through. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What did they do?" looked like they wanted the earth to swallow them whole. For the first time all evening, she laughed. A real laugh, too, not the forced polite kind. And afterward, she said something I'll probably remember forever. "I think I needed to hear that," she told me. "Not the rude people part, the part where you still wore the blouse anyway." That stayed with me long after the fundraiser ended. Because she was right. The important part of the story wasn't the confrontation. It was the fact that I showed up in the first place. Healing sometimes looks incredibly small from the outside. Wearing a certain shirt again, looking in the mirror a little longer, going out without checking your reflection 10 times, letting yourself exist in public without apologizing for your body. Those moments matter, and little by little, they add up. By the second anniversary after my surgery, things had changed dramatically. Physically, my reconstruction finally settled enough that everything looked much more natural. Emotionally, though, the bigger transformation had already happened internally. I stopped seeing my body as something ruined. That was the real milestone. Not perfection, not confidence every single day. Just peace. Or at least something close to it. Sometimes I still catch myself adjusting clothes self-consciously in fitting rooms. Sometimes scars still surprise me in mirrors. Trauma doesn't disappear neatly just because time passes. But it softens. And eventually you stop viewing yourself through the lens of what was lost. One night, my husband and I were getting ready for another dinner date when he noticed me staring at myself in the mirror again. "You doing the thing?" he asked. "The thing?" "The overanalyzing thing." "I'm not overanalyzing. You've adjusted that shirt 14 times. I sighed dramatically. "Maybe a little." He walked over behind me, rested his chin on my shoulder, and met my eyes in the mirror. "You know what I see?" he asked. "Please don't say a beautiful woman again." I was going to say someone who takes way too long to get ready. I burst out laughing. Then his expression softened. "But also someone strong as hell." That word used to make me uncomfortable. Strong. People throw it at survivors constantly, sometimes without understanding how complicated it feels. Because surviving isn't always strength. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's exhaustion, sometimes it's just continuing because you don't have another option. But over time, I started redefining strength for myself. Strength wasn't pretending the experience didn't hurt. Strength wasn't loving every scar immediately. Strength was allowing myself to keep living anyway. Keep laughing, keep dressing up for anniversaries, keep showing up in the world after everything my body had endured. That's real strength. And honestly, if there's one thing I wish more people understood, it's this. You never know what someone's body has survived. The woman with scars might be recovering from cancer. The man walking slowly might be dealing with chronic pain. The teenager wearing long sleeves in summer might be hiding medical devices or insecurities or wounds you know nothing about. Everyone is carrying something, which is why casual cruelty is so dangerous. Most people don't remember every compliment they receive from strangers, but they absolutely remember humiliation, especially when it hits an already vulnerable place. That group at the bar probably forgot the incident within a week. I'll remember it forever. Not because it destroyed me, but because it reminded me how important compassion really is. These days, when I wear lower cut tops, I don't think about whether strangers approve anymore. I think about how hard I fought to still be here wearing them at all. That changes your perspective. A lot. So if there's any lesson buried inside that awkward little bar encounter, maybe it's this. Be careful when judging strangers. The person you're mocking might be carrying scars you can't see. And sometimes the body you call fake is actually proof that someone survived something very, very real.